Talking with the experts.
In episode 388 with Theresa Houghton, she discusses the power of stories in marketing, particularly founder stories and journeys.
I think that's especially true of the smaller, more unique brands. And also, I think there's something about how something fits uniquely into your lifestyle. And that's another way that telling stories can connect with consumers. I'm thinking especially of like lifestyle brands or brands that are, there's a lot of brands out there now, big in the beverage space for like the calming, the rest. There's a big movement towards zero alcohol kinds of beverages. A lot of these are really centering around something that's big right now is that we're all stressed out. We all run too much and we don't take enough time to just chill out. So a lot of these are targeted toward that part of people's lifestyles. And of course, there's a lot.
Talking with the experts.
Talking with the experts would love to acknowledge Global Glamping Charities Incorporated for generously supporting this podcast. Global Glamping Charities, solving homelessness in all of its forms. Reach out to them at globalglamping.org.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. My guest today is Theresa Houghton, and we're going to be discussing what are we going to be discussing? The power of stories in marketing, and particularly we're going to be focusing on founder stories and journeys. And sharing the founders and the team's vision, mission, and journey, it creates powerful emotional connections with customers. And it also helps businesses and brands connect with the people who share their goals and who want to be part of helping the business succeed. And Theresa is a chief nerd at the Modern Health Nerd. And Theresa, and her nickname is Sam, by the way, is helping plant-based and better for you brands understand their customers and create better content. She's a graduate of both the Bauman College Nutrition Consultant Program and the T. Colin Campbell Centre for Nutrition Studies Plant-Based Nutrition Certificate Program, and uses this expertise to inform the copy that she creates for her clients. Her writings appear regularly on nutritionstudies.org and The Upside by Vital Cost, and has been featured on Green Queen Media. She has been a guest on the Vegan Stories podcast, the Vegan Visibility, the Protein X Virtual Coffee Series, and Let's Eat with Mark Samuel. So without further ado, please welcome Theresa Sam Houghton. Hi, Theresa. How are you?
Well, I'm starting to wind down a little bit for the day, but I'm still on the ball for a chat. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So how did you get into doing what you're doing and so much study that you've done?
Well, this is kind of interesting. I like to say that my background is a little bit like Little Billy from that Family Circus comic, where he would run around the neighborhood and there'd be this big dotted line that follows him everywhere except where he's allegedly supposed to go, and so it takes him like 10 times as long to get there. I think the whole trajectory really started when I went plant-based 13 years ago. I was kind of flexitarian for a while, then I was vegetarian, and then I finally acknowledged my lactose intolerance and cut out dairy. So I went plant-based and I got really fascinated by the health information. And that was when I started doing the studying, and I did the plant-based nutrition certificate, liked that so much that I sought out a lengthy program, and that wound me up at Bowman College. They didn't have as as extensive a selection of 100% plant-based type courses back then, but that was also a very just a whole food type program. So I did that one. And then I was doing some health coaching for a while, but that's hard to float in upstate New York. It's a little bit difficult and hard sell. So I was doing some content writing to pay the bills. Unfortunately, it was through a content mill, which any writer out there who has been in one of those is cringing right now. About February 2020, right before the whole world exploded, I hooked up with a business coach, and he encouraged me to kind of think bigger and step out. And I started doing some other things with content, started to do a little bit of strategy, a little bit of customer research, dabbled here and there. And I finally settled on what I'm doing now with Modern Health Nerd. I had actually had a podcast for a while and called it Modern Health Nerd, and wound up liking that so much I rebranded. So now I focus on customer research and long form content writing. I've really always been a writer. And one of the things I want to do now, in addition to what I'm doing, is kind of bring some personal writing under the umbrella of what I'm doing, so that I'm not just writing for brands, but I'm also writing some things that I've kind of been putting on the back burner and want to bring more to the forefront. So
yeah, that's an interesting journey, and I'm sure that content writing is not everyone's cup of tea. They know they've got a story to tell. They have several stories, but getting it down on paper or on a keyboard or whatever it happens to be, they can find it a little bit challenging. But why is it important for businesses and companies to solidify their story that helps bring the team together?
There's a couple of things I've been thinking about with story. There is an inherent danger in telling your story, and that you can, in trying to be authentic, be too rigid with it, polish it too much, and wind up with something that sounds inauthentic, and people can smell that a mile away. But what I have found in working with brands, and also in interviewing founders in my own podcast, and I had a LinkedIn founder story series for a while, is everybody has a journey or story that is relatable in some way to either their customers or to other founders, and telling those stories in a way that shows the real trajectory and in a way that projects the passion of the founder, of the team, and of the brand as a whole, is something that, first, it is going to unify the team, because that is going to be kind of a North Star. It's like, this is why we started. This is how we got here. This is why we're doing this. These are the changes that we want to make. This is the vision that we have for, in the plant-based space, really, there's a lot of people who have visions for legit changing the world. And that's a really good foundation to be going to work and going towards every day. So you have that for kind of internally, but externally, it does, as you mentioned earlier, it does create an emotional connection. People don't emotionally connect with the blog where they open up the blog and every post is really just written for traffic. It's written for SEO. It's written for the algorithms. People just don't connect with that. They get the answer that they want and they leave, and it doesn't convert well. I know some people do have some success with it, and I'm not knocking SEO overall. Obviously, if you have a product, you want to rank for your product name and your brand name and things, but you got to have some personality behind your brand. People don't buy from a faceless brand unless they've just been doing it out of habit for a long time. And if you're a small company, especially now with all these startups out there, really the way to differentiate is to just be who you are and to share what's important and special to you. And I think that that is also where the content writing and the personal writing collide, where you have that storytelling element and the founder is getting their story out there, and the team also has an opportunity to tell their stories and share their passions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that good stories, they spark conversations. And I think when you're doing writing, whether you're writing on social media, or writing an article in a magazine or whatever, you always want to spark a conversation. So it has to be where it piques people's interests, so the conversation can happen.
Yeah, I think that's I'm glad you brought that up. That's another very important element. Again, coming from the plant-based space, there's a lot of talk about big things. There's talk about health and chronic disease and dietary change and sustainability and the climate and plastic is killing everybody and all this. And these are big things, and people are very, very passionate about it, and they do have big visions. And I know that in other industries, people want to make big changes and see things shift, but it doesn't trickle down to the general public very quickly or very easily. It's so easy to get inside your own industry bubble and just bounce the narrative around. And so to take a step outside of that, which I frequently do, it's interesting because I feel like I live in like several separate worlds. I'm involved in some Web3 stuff, and that's a weird world. And I'm involved in plant-based, and that's very much an industry bubble, and we all know it. But then I step out in my regular life and I talk to my friends and I go to church and I go to the grocery store, and it's completely different plane. And in order to get these conversations going, you really have to connect with people. And I think too, starting those conversations, it's great word of mouth, and it helps companies to get partnerships that are going to help them move beyond their early stages and into the place where they really can start making those bigger changes. They start to be able to partner with suppliers or investors who want to see the same things happen and want to help them succeed.
Yeah, I recently put a post on my personal profile on Facebook, and that led me to getting the sponsorship from Global Glamping Charities, because they know my background in podcasting. They know my background in domestic and family violence. So, and they're basically looking after homeless people, because of domestic violence or other natural disasters. So, it was an alignment made in heaven, really. But if I hadn't have put that post up, then this partnership wouldn't have happened. So, good content is very important.
And like you said, you have to be ready to step out there and put posts like that up. I think it's going back to what you said earlier, is getting down in front of the keyboard and getting your story out. It's not even just that maybe you don't feel like you can write it yourself, but even working with somebody else to write it and working with somebody else to get it down, it's really scary to put yourself out there. And I even struggle with this too, with like personal writing and some opinion pieces that I'm working on. I write it and I think, what is going to happen when I publish this? And you have to be ready to take some uncomfortable steps, and not everyone's going to like it. I always point to, Seth Godin. If they don't like it, it's not for them. The people who do like it and who do congregate around it will be the people who will stick around in the long term, because they appreciate the transparency, they appreciate the courage that it takes, and they will be the people who truly support either the business or the mission, or both.
Yeah, I had some quite some of the comments came back from some of my Facebook friends, was from, and quite people that I hadn't heard from for a long time. And I thought the comments were quite interesting because I put myself out there. I was really authentic. I was very raw, and and they appreciated the fact that they could see the real me and not just the stuff that I portray on social media as my business, or the veneer of me. They actually got to know the real me. And I think that's really important, even in your business posts, on your business pages, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or TikTok or any of those things, that you're authentic, because people buy from people. They don't buy from corporations, as you said, unless it's a really well-known brand, and and they've been referred to them by someone else, or they want to keep up with the Joneses next door, or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, basically people buy from people. So being authentic is really, really important in all of your copy, rather than just the veneer that you want people to see.
Yeah, and obviously there are boundaries. You don't put everything out there. I like to harken back to, I'm an older millennial, so when we were younger, we all had an open diary, we all had a live journal. Some of us, basically we would go on the internet during the day or at night, and we would just spill everything and just put it out there. Obviously, you don't want to do that. There are boundaries that are important to keep, because you don't want you don't want everybody in your private business, but at the same time, you don't want to be canned, you know? You don't just want to be canned in corporate because, like you said, you know, you're a person. You're not canned and corporate. And even people that I follow, I like to refer to, there's a guy that I subscribe to his fitness site. His name is Millionaire Hoy. And he has built a really thriving personal brand. And obviously he's very on brand when he's talking about his, you know, his workouts and his challenges and this, that, and the other thing. But also he has like a Discord community for his subscribers. And in there, he'll post videos. He will do behind the scenes stuff, and he's in there being active, and we all feel like we know him, to the point where like I reached out to him when I was podcasting and I wound up having him on my podcast, and now it's like we're friends. So there are obviously still boundaries there. He has a family and there's some stuff that he does not talk about because it's none of our business, but he's open enough with us that it's like having a friend rather than this like untouchable YouTube influencer or something. And that's kind of the balance that you want to shoot for.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when millennials were, you know, starting to use social media, it was like, oh my God, they're airing their dirty laundry. And it was just very painful.
Well, being a young at the late 90s, early 2000s was very painful. I look back on like the pop culture that like my parents had, and I look back on the pop culture that I had, and I'm like, like rock and roll and the Beatles and all of that. I mean, like, I'm not like hugely into that stuff. I have some issues with it, but it's like, look at all that stuff. And when we were younger, we had the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Hanson, and I'm like, oh, ouch.
So why is it important for businesses to use powerful stories in their marketing?
Well, I think we've touched on a little bit of it, that emotional connection, and also really differentiation. Everyone's like, how do you differentiate? A good example is early on when the plant-based space was growing. What, for people who aren't familiar with what's going on there, way back in the day, when veganism really first started, it was, you know, you had lentils and tofu and sprouts and all this, and that was it. You know, I know people who have been vegan for longer than I've been alive, and they got through just fine. There wasn't really anything back then. When I went, we pretty much had soy hot dogs and plastic fake cheese that the packaging probably tasted better than the cheese. But now we have this explosion of alternatives everywhere. It's around the world. It's expanding all across different nations. And some of the stuff is really good. Well, early days, you could just slap a plant-based label on there and it would be like, oh my goodness, this is plant-based. It's so new. But now everybody's using the term. It's kind of become flat. So in order to differentiate, something really needs to be different. You can't just launch a plant-based nugget or a plant-based burger and say, you know, look, I made something new and crazy. And a lot of the companies that were using this is amazing and new kind of copy, it's not going to float anymore. And you can slap certifications on it, but that's still not going to work. I have seen products with so many certifications. I'm like, I just want to eat food. I don't care if you're Whole30 approved, non-GMO, whatever. I just want to eat food. So it comes down to that differentiation. So if somebody comes to your website and you are, say, another plant-based burger company, are you just trying to sell them a burger, or is there something really interesting? Like what's your, you know, do you have something unique about your background? A lot of people are starting to highlight, if they're using like an ancient grain from a certain area of the world that maybe isn't as well known, or they're sourcing from farmers to be able to do fair trade and pay them fair prices if they're doing some kind of product. Those are the stories that people are going to think, that's really interesting. What is this grain? Where does it come from? Wait a minute, I didn't know that the farmers weren't paid fair wages. Why is this so different? And some people are actually getting into, I found a couple of brands, I really wish I could remember the names. They were actually putting up interviews with the farmers that they had that they sourced from. And there was another brand, I believe it was a Atlantic sea vegetable or something of that ilk. They do kelp, and they have little profiles of their kelp farmers. These are very interesting things that put more behind your brand than just, you know, oh, I found this seaweed that I'm going to put on my salad. It's really interesting. You can go and say, oh, this might have been grown by, Kevin, who lives in, somewhere in Maine, and this is what he does, and this is what his job is like. You can really have those interesting connections. And that also builds a kind of community around your brand. A lot of people are big into community now. You can't fake community. You can't just launch a Discord and be like, look, we have a community. Community happens. Going back to my example of the fitness guy, Millionaire Hoy, he didn't instantly get a community. He got a community that built up around him doing something unique, doing it really well, and being who he was. And that is how you start to build a community around your brand. People start to get interested in your story. They share your vision or your passion. They feel like they're getting to know something about you or your brand, and they want to be part of that. Going back to the idea of wanting to change the world, we all kind of want to change the world, don't we? So maybe we all can't. The big difference between like a consumer and a founder is the consumer is the one who's looking for the product that fits their needs. The founder is the one who couldn't find it and decided to make it. And these stories make those connections between the makers and the consumers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is important as a founder to be able to articulate your story to the masses, because it enables the masses to get to know who you are. As I said before, people buy from people. And so if they can get the story behind the brand, then they're more likely to buy from you, because you are different from, your competitor, because they know your story and they may find it relatable, and so they will buy from you.
And that's a big thing, is relatable. I think a lot of the times, I even felt this like as a podcaster, I would have a founder or something from a company I really admired on my podcast, and I'd be a little starstruck, but then get to start talking with each other and realize, this was somebody who was, just like me. And like I said, almost inevitably it was either, I had some health problem and I needed to overcome it, or I wanted XYZ product and I couldn't find it. And instead of giving up like a lot of us would, they're like, well, I couldn't find it, so I made it myself. And the stories may be similar, but the journey is always different. And there's always going to be something relatable in it. Even if I, as a consumer, am not like founder minded or entrepreneurial minded, I know the frustration of, I went to the store and all the protein bars had 20,000 grams of sugar and like 1 gram of protein. And I know the frustration of, I'm really busy and need really healthy food fast. Just these different things. We understand the same frustrations. And I think there's a level of appreciation almost. It's like, somebody made this. It didn't exist before. I wished it had. And this person made this. What made them make this? And there are those little points of connection that are common, I think, to human experience, no matter what the source of your original frustration or problem was, no matter what your ups or downs are. We've all felt the similar emotions. And that's the big thing about writing and writers too, and being the person who puts this out there, whether you're writing for somebody or you're writing for yourself. There's something about being able to put those emotions out there in words in a way that connects with other people. It draws people together. And I know that sounds kind of weird. It's like, because we're talking about marketing content, really. But I think that marketing content can be a lot more than just something that sells products. I really think that it can be something that can connect people. And instead of just putting more noise out on the internet, I think we can start really having an impact with it in positive ways.
And I think people buy through emotion anyway. They don't use their head as a rule to buy something. It's something that touches, some reason they buy it. They like the look of it, which is an emotion because they like what they're seeing. It touches them in some personal way. It means something, whether it's the color, the shape, the size, whatever. It touches them emotionally, and that's why people buy. They don't buy because their head says something. They buy because their heart says something.
I think that's especially true of the smaller, more unique brands. And also, I think there's something about how something fits uniquely into your lifestyle. And that's another way that telling stories can connect with consumers. I'm thinking especially of like lifestyle brands or brands that are, there's a lot of brands out there now, big in the beverage space for like the calming, the rest. There's a big movement towards zero alcohol kinds of beverages. A lot of these are really centering around something that's big right now is that we're all stressed out. We all run too much and we don't take enough time to just chill out. So a lot of these are targeted toward that part of people's lifestyles. And of course, there's a lot of performance stuff. There's like athletic wear, there's food that supports sports or whatever. There's big push, obviously, on plant protein now. Those are more for the active side. And there's a lot of stuff for families going on out there too. So that's a part of your story too, is like, what part of somebody's life are you fitting into and how do you relate to that? And I think that that's really important for people to think about, especially people who are used to writing just like for SEO. You might be chasing the wrong keywords and trying to tell the wrong story. And it comes back to your own story. Well, why did you make it? Why was it important to you? Are those the kinds of people you're selling to? And is that going to be the kind of person you attract? And the stories you're telling really need to be based around, like you said, that emotional and that kind of lifestyle connection, instead of that keyword's going to get me a lot of traffic, I'll tell that story. It's like, tell the story that makes sense for you and for your customers.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who's, I mean, I know SEO is, it's good for your business, good for your brand, it's good for your marketing. But really, if you're writing an article with SEO totally in mind, then I think you're on the wrong track.
Exactly. Like I said, it's great for product pages. It's great for your homepage. Those are the things you really want to double down on the SEO for, because you want people to be able to type your brand into Google or something that is related to your products and be able to find you. But when it comes to your blog, when it comes to your about page, when it comes to, if you're doing, I'm going to say thought leadership, I really hate that term. We need a better one. But if you're doing thought leadership, if you're doing like PR, or you're doing articles in, online publications, or you're on podcasts, tell your story, tell stories that are going to resonate with real people.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with that. I think, as I said earlier, if you're not authentic and you're not credible, then people, they won't come back to you. They will just skip to the next one. It's like reading a book. If you don't find the, first chapter interesting, it's highly unlikely you'll find the rest of the book interesting. I always read the last page. Before I read any book, I always read the last page. If I like the ending, then I'll read the book.
It's funny you should say that. I had the experience the other day. I was like, I think I'll read this book. And I read like the first 5 or 10 pages and I was like, this is so badly written. I think I'll read something else. And I think that brings me to just another point too, is there's a lot of bad writing on the internet, like lots of bad writing.
It's boring.
There's that.
It's full of jargon. It's just grammar's terrible. And I don't know who their editor is, but they need to be shot.
I wouldn't go that far, but they definitely need better editors. And to that end, I'd like to give a shout out. I'm a member of a writers collective called Foster. So if anybody is in need of good editing, we have a collective of real humans who will edit your drafts for you. So we're at foster.co if that's something that you're interested in getting some help with. One of our goals at Foster is to help people write better stories. So that's one of the reasons I'm involved with that. But there's just some bad writing on the internet, and I think that there's a couple of things for that. You touched on it. There's not a lot of good editing. Another thing is this just push to always be creating and getting it out there. And I think sometimes people just get overwhelmed and they're like, okay, I finished it, I got to publish it. When you're going for stories, I talked earlier about not being over polished, but obviously you don't want to be under polished either. That original initial raw draft, that's going to have a lot of good stuff in it, but it's not going to be ready for prime time, as they say. Do they say that anymore now that we have streaming services? I don't know. I'm showing my millennial age. So that's where it comes in to work with somebody like an editor or work with a content writer to find the elements of your story that really are going to resonate and put those all together. And sometimes that's just the simple act of you get on a Zoom call, and I've done this with clients. You just get on a Zoom call and you tell your story. They take notes, they record the call, and you distill out of it what are the things that are really important for the brand, what's going to resonate with the audience. And then also you have maybe the stuff that you didn't use for that particular, if you're crafting like a particular brand story or founder story to use for a specific purpose, or like your about page, you still have all the stuff you didn't use. And that might be fun stories to tell when you're on a podcast, or if you get interviewed for a magazine or an online outlet. It's like, this is a little known fact about our brand, or these are some things that happen behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And we almost went under because XYZ, but then this happened. You have all of those things, and they're finally out of your head, and they're down on paper, or they're in a document somewhere, and you can keep pulling more from that story, because your story is just going to keep going. I mean, it doesn't stop. Even if you wind up pivoting or you end your brand and go do something else, your story doesn't stop. There's always elements along the way,
and you pivoted, or why you've changed tact in your business. Of course, that story's never ending. Theresa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you if they'd like to work with you? Importantly, because I think that what you're offering is an amazing service.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm not active on social media anymore. I do have a LinkedIn profile if people want to look at it and look at what I have posted and what I have written. Easiest way to get in contact with me is email, which is sam, S-A-M, @modernhealthnerd.com. If you want to see some of my own writing, you can see it on modernhealthnerd.com. I have both a portfolio and a blog. And I also just recently launched a personal essay newsletter, which is over on Substack at continuedjourney.substack.com.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that information. So go and check out Sam's work on her website, or at the other place that she said. Oh my God, my memory's so bad. Sorry. Sam, what words of wisdom would you share with our audience today?
Well, we've been talking about telling stories, we've been talking about writing. I'll share a little bit from my own personal journey recently. I mentioned I've been backburnering kind of my own personal writing, and that's because I was looking at it and I'm like, well, that's not monetized. Maybe I can't monetize it. Maybe it's not really work, but I can't just keep sitting on it. So if there's something that's going on that you really can't sit on, that you're really burning to do, whether you're a founder, whether you're not, whether you're just somebody who has an idea, at least try it, give it some time in your schedule, put it out there, work on it, and don't worry about where it's going to go. Just get started with it and enjoy it.
Yeah, you never know where the journey might take you.
So true.
Absolutely. Sam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I hope we can talk again.
Well, thanks so much, Rose. I enjoyed it as well.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.